Welcome to the Minnesota State High School Baseball Coaches Association podcast. And we're very fortunate today for October 1st, 2023, that we have a family man, an activities director, a coach of many sports, a person who's been an advocate for other coaches and other teachers around in the profession. And on top of that, a Hall of Famer and an award winner, a state champion, and now an author. So welcome, Dr. Troy Urdahl, to the podcast. We really appreciate you being here.
Thanks for having me, Don. I appreciate it.
You bet. So, your book, Chasing Influence, has been a work of yours that just came out. And I'm just wondering what made you decide to write it. And, for this book, if there are people who are just coming upon this and just learning about the book, what's in it for them? What kind of things could they look forward to seeing or reading about?
Absolutely. And thanks for asking. It's really been a passion of mine, and I've been working toward this for decades without knowing it. So I serve to use the Power School activities to make the world a better place. As a coach and as an AD, I think there's such value in what we do in high school sports, and I show up every day trying to use the power of that to make the world a better place. I didn't think I'd ever write a book about it, though. And so at St. Anthony Village High School, where I'm the AD, we do weekly lessons. And every week we tackle different topics with all of our teams. And as the AD, I push them out to our teams and say, hey, here's a great topic for us to talk about this week. So I've been building this and really writing this book for the better part of 2 decades now without knowing it. It wasn't until I got stuck in Mexico with COVID that I got that bolt of inspiration of, hey, there might be a way to weave all these stories together and to make it into a narrative, to tell a story and to live out that purpose. And so that's really what the last 2 years.
The way you did this is so creative. Talk about using your character Stick Olson and not some of the other characters.
Stick Olson became an amalgamation of every coach I've ever had, especially those transformational coaches, with a heavy influence from Tink Larson in Waseca. And a lot of people really know Tink. Wonderful human being, transformational coach with a really interesting life story. And so I took bits and pieces from my own playing days, from my own coaching, from surrounding myself with wonderful people, and then used some of Tink's life story along the way and wove them together and to make something that's really narrative nonfiction. And so it's fictionalized, but it's telling really leadership stories that could help any coach, any athlete, but not just that. There's really a lot of how to live a good life and self-help, self-improvement type stories within the book as well.
And Tink isn't your only influence. There's others.
Absolutely. I was very lucky to be the product of a wonderful environment going all the way back to high school in Litchfield and other halls of famers. Red Jones was a Hall of Famer, is a Hall of Famer, who is a huge influence for me. My high school coach, Jeff Willeen, and then Ruben Nathy with the Litchfield Blues. And as a matter of fact, it's my days playing amateur ball, some of my best memories of playing baseball ever, and where some of the stories from the book really come from. And anyone who's had that experience of what it means to play on a team and grow those bonds with other people and what that's like can relate with that tightness and stories that you remember for the rest of your life.
You talk about weekly meetings with your coaches, and I want to get into that in a little bit. But in order to get to that point, you had to recognize a need for that. And you had to recognize that there was probably potential change in the kids that we're working with. Do you see that kids are different now, or have you seen that type of change? And maybe have you recognized coaches might be different?
Yeah, and I think it's not just kids, it's society. And sport has changed dramatically over the last couple of decades. And we've moved away and increasingly continue to move away from that community-based sport. And so who knows what the future looks like. But I do know that sports can either push a person up or they can push them down. And sports, they have the power to do either. And unfortunately, many of us have stories of moments where sports were crushing for us. where it really wasn't a wonderful, positive experience. On the other hand, when we do it right, we can really lift somebody up for their entire life. And that's really why I think we are connected to schools, is because we are teaching and learning. If you think about it, there really isn't a reason why sports would be part of a school unless we were providing lessons and able to supplement, even advance the curriculum of what's happening bell to bell each day.
You talk a lot about connectedness in your book and how making people feel valued and in every part of the team. You also bring up some really unique concepts, such as that of the redwood forest and Papua and such. Can you talk about those ideas?
Yeah, and a lot of this comes, I was a history teacher, and so throughout the book, you're going to see a lot of different examples from history and from psychology. So as a social studies teacher and teaching these lessons for years and years, redwoods have a remarkable story. The General Sherman redwood is 2,500 years old. I mean, if you think about how long ago 2,500 years ago was, that's the time of Socrates, right? And this tree still lives in California today. All of the natural disasters, all of the storms, and at 275 feet tall, it continues to stand. And it's done that for 2,500 years. And the way it does that is its roots grow out. If you know anything about redwoods, the roots really don't go down into the ground. What they do, and this is why redwoods always grow in groves or in clusters, is because their roots interlock with each other. And I think it's a wonderful analogy for teams and what strong teams are, where really you connect and you bond. And it's not about the individual tree, and it's not about just planting your roots, but about those bonds that you create with others. And that's really what Kapwa is as well. That idea of synergy or the spirit within a team, the idea that 1 + 1 = 3, that you can get more by taking individual parts and combining them than you could by the individual pieces alone. And so that's a neat concept that is explored in the book, just this shared experience that we all go through together on teams.
And we is more important than me, and we all have been on. We've been, if you've been around long enough, you've been fortunate to be a part of a team that has that special bond. And those are the ones that you remember when people say to you, "What is that? What's your favorite team, or what's the favorite group that you've ever worked with?" And sometimes it's not the championship team. It might be the team that overachieved and came together and had been just truly authentic in their relationships and their support of one another.
And study after study will show exactly what you just said. There's even a name for it, the pizza parlor phenomenon, where it's the bonds and connections away from competition that many times are more powerful.
Yeah. In your book, and again, just continuing to read through parts of it, and so many things just connect and land. And you touch on historical pieces. You're talking about Sisyphus. You're talking about Martin Luther King and the struggle, and you're talking about so many things that if you enjoy baseball and you enjoy history, this is really a book that it's difficult to put down. And that's what's so cool about it, Troy, is that you've been able to not only connect local people, icons of the game, and in communities we all know, with this great sense of history, this great, we're not in this alone kind of feel, and from cover to cover, and that's what's so incredible about it. It had to be truly just all of these speeches, all of these words that you hear over time and time again of either being a player or a coach, putting them together. It had to take you a long time to do this. I mean, think of all the notes you probably had. I can't imagine.
Yeah, it's a couple of years solid. And, I think it relates really closely to an athlete training or even a coach working with teams, is we always want to do our best. And so for me, if I was going to work on this project and put it out there for the world to hopefully benefit the world, right? We've all been consumers. I'm a constant consumer of others' wisdom, knowledge, and information. And I felt like it was time for me to be a producer. And it was my turn to help others and to produce something that hopefully will benefit another person. And if I was going to do that, I wanted to put the best version possible forward. And so about 2 years of work and just really consistently staying with it to get to this point. And I'm really happy with where it turned out in the end.
For sure. You knocked it out of the park in terms of being able to add to, this is for players, this is for coaches, this is for aspiring coaches. This could be for business, for people who are trying to develop teams and team feel within their business and in and amongst the people that they work closely with. So there's so many, I mean, it's life. You talk about passion and what your main character, who we all know as Tink Larson, but the passion that he had for things. And the give me a sense of the type of person it takes to be truly an effective leader or effective person that folks can organize and rally around. You talk a lot about that in your book.
I think it all starts with that service mindset. Really, the most transformational leaders, the ones in my experiences that are most impactful, are the ones where it's not about them and it really is about others. And so when we can get that mindset shift, and I believe this is true for us as coaches working with our athletes, where it's no longer about serving me, but about serving others. And that's the switch. And I think for a long time, leaders felt, and we see this with captains, that you reach the pinnacle, that you are now the king of the castle, and everyone else is there to serve you and to do your bidding. It's 100%. It's a 180 from that, 100% different from that, where it's our turn and it's our job to help and serve others as leaders. And so that's really, I think, the heart of servant leadership is having that other-centered, focused and mindset.
It doesn't happen overnight, does it?
No, and I don't think you ever get there either, right? I think this is something where you're always becoming, where you're always working towards something. It's a journey, not necessarily a destination. And I think that's part of it, is that every day we have an opportunity to improve, and every day we have a new crack at doing something better. And that for all of us, I think we owe it to ourselves to take advantage of that opportunity.
And you talk about doing that with your weekly meetings that you have and your sessions that you work with your coaches. How impactful has that been for your coaches and yourself?
You mentioned Sisyphus earlier. I think it's a wonderful analogy for exactly that. Right? In the story of Sisyphus, he's condemned to rolling the boulder up the mountain each and every day, only for it to roll back down the hill at the end of the day. Next day, starts over, pushing that thing back up the mountain again. I think that's what it feels like to be a coach a lot of times, is that we keep pushing that boulder up the hill, and sometimes that rolls back down. And sometimes it might even feel like it rolls back down over us. But we don't stop. We keep pushing that back up the hill because we know it's going to make a difference. And that's part of what success means for me. And I think that anyone who's coached, especially our veteran coaches, can relate to that. You don't really know what success is going to look like. You know, you talk about this spring, how your team's going to be. We don't know for years what impact we're going to have. It's going to be decades before we know what kind of an impact we have on our athletes. And that's that long view that I try to take when working with our athletes, because anyone who's experienced it knows how rewarding and gratifying it is to see your athletes go on to do great things down the line. And we want to win games for sure, but that's where the title of the book comes in. Chase the influence, right? It's really not about chasing wins. We're all competitive people. We want to win. And so we're always going to be striving for that. That won't go anywhere. But what we really have the possibility of doing, and how many jobs have this possibility of really influencing young people for the rest of their life. And that's what's awesome about coaching, is that we get to show up every day and make a positive difference in another person's life. And I think that's unique to coaching, and it's what draws us to it.
And I think in education, we're always talking about wanting to influence and have that long-term or the relationship that might be long-term with people. I think sometimes other walks of society try to copy some of that and look for maybe a magic bullet, or look for a one size fits all type of solution to be able to build relationships. It's not that way. It's just not. Maybe talk about some of the things that you've done with your teams or with your coaches to help them reach and connect with kids.
Yeah, and you hit that key point that we're coaching human beings, right? Not human doings. We're coaching human beings, and every last one of them is their own individual. And if everyone were the same, then sure, you could have that cookie cutter approach where you're addressing everyone the same. But I just think, especially now in 2023 and beyond, boy, we have students coming to us with lots of needs. And for me, it boils down to, and it continues to, that we need to have the care and support for them. But that also comes with expectations. And I think that's okay, that we need to have those high expectations. But it can't happen without high support. And it's a both and that for that individual and their needs, we're going to meet them where we're at, but we're also going to have accountability and we're also going to have expectations for them. And I think that is how we become that difference maker, where they're really talking about you 10, 20 years down the line at the class reunion or whatever it might be, when they're talking about how wonderful Coach Gowerlick was and what he meant in their lives. And I can't think of any more rewarding result than that. And again, I think that's the draw for so many of us and why we get in this, and that it's important for us to remember that. So that's why we coach.
You don't get into it for the money.
No. I hope not. I hope not. Yeah.
And the idea of you can make such a difference. So you are now an author. You've been through the process. This is your first book that you've written. And so you have hit so many pieces to the puzzle on what it takes, what chasing influence means, and how you can become a transformational kind of coach. What's next for Troy Urdahl? What's the next step on this? Or is that something you don't give away?
No. So in part for me, and I think this is normal with coaches, we're always talking about other people, right? We're talking about our teams. For me as an activities director, I'm lucky to be a part of a wonderful team and a wonderful coaches. And so if this is my purpose, if my purpose is to use the power of school activities to make the world a better place, I need to promote it. And so part of doing that is a next step, producing some workbooks that really go with the lessons in the book that coaches can use with their teams. The stories in the book are able to be used, but this is a little more intentional, where it provides a format in a lesson, gives questions with potential answers, develops out some of the quotes a little bit more, where it is actually a teaching and instructional tool. And so that's my next step, is to get that ready and available for coaches, again, to help them make that positive difference with their teams.
That sounds exciting. Sounds neat to be able to have that system in place to help people. Maybe not everybody necessarily feels 100% comfortable on that side of things, where they know the X's and they know the O's, and building relationships is just something they think may just magically happens. And sometimes you have to know the whole idea of they need to know that you care before, you know the old saying, but there has to be something there before you can really, start teaching some of those X's and O's. So,
and I remember I interviewed a couple schools, and St. Anthony was one. The other school I interviewed right out of college, so graduated from Hamlin. And I remember an interview question to this date that I failed, and I know it now. But the question was, does it matter if your teacher likes you or not? Mm-hmm. And I gave the old 22-year-old version Troy answer of, no, it's important they respect me. And I'm not there to win favor or to be friends. I now know how wrong that answer was. Like, of course it's important for them to like us. Will everyone? No. Is it a popularity contest? It's not. But will our athletes relate to us better? Will our relationships be stronger? Will they perform better if we have that bond and that connection, that relationship? Absolutely. And so I think, Don, you hit a key point of coaches need to want to have that relationship, right? And I think that's something we've really seen change in the last decade of coaching. It's been a wonderful positive change, is that we understand how significant and important that relationship piece is.
Coaches who can't build those relationships don't last.
And it's not fun. It really isn't. Yep. And it's not enjoyable.
Yeah, it's truly an investment. And also there may be years where, as a coach, you may have things going on in your own life that doesn't allow for you to be the coach that you want to be as well. So I mean, there's different things that come up, and but in a transformational coach's mindset, you work with those, and those are bumps in the road, and you still have your main mission of trying to reach and help kids be better versions of themselves. So, and you talk about that a lot.
Well, I think where people get tripped up on that is, if you're winning, it might sometimes be easier for coaches to forget about all that, because winning can kind of gloss over or mask some of that. But what happens when the wins aren't coming? I mean, that's really when the rubber hits the road. Now you don't have those connections and relationships or lessons learned, and you don't have the wins. And that's really the recipe for disaster.
We've all seen teams unravel quickly. And that's that. Hey, I can't thank you enough for that time. And I know that your book is out now on Amazon, correct?
Yeah, best way to find it is on Amazon. There's a Kindle version and a hardcover version. And if anyone is interested in knowing more about the book, or a free newsletter I put together with supporting information, materials, book discussion questions, it's at www.chasing-influence.com. Chasing-influence.com.
And also you can find the book linked from our MSHSBCA Twitter feed, or formerly Twitter, now known as X feed, I guess you could call it. And hopefully that stays free for a while. Otherwise, we'll have to figure out another way to do this. But we want to thank our sponsors for being able to support this, from Canterbury Park to Cambria to all the great people that we have that is formerly at Big, but now at Game One Athletic. And we appreciate them. But Troy, I appreciate your time. Anything that I missed, anything you want to add before we close this out?
Great talking to you. And just, again, thanks to the Minnesota State High School Baseball Coaches Association for really helping fulfill and furthering that mission, that we are partners in education and that we love this wonderful game of baseball. And there's so many fantastic lessons that can be taught through this game.
All right. Thanks for your time, Troy. I really appreciate you, and I hope the book does really well. And it would be great to talk to you again about it as we move along, get some reaction to your book, and you start talking about the process of helping coaches, maybe with more of a scripted type of program. You're talking about the next steps to things. So thank you for the time, Troy. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Don.